Channels Television. Well, the concessioning of Nigerian ports in 2006 was to boost investors' confidence in the maritime sector. And 7 years on, we're wondering how much of this has been achieved. Well, I'm now being joined on the program by a maritime lawyer, Barrister Paul Nnaji, and we're going to be taking a look at this in the next couple of minutes. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us on the program.
Good morning. It's nice to be with you.
Now, concessioning of the ports was, the objectives. The government's main objectives of concessioning the port was to reduce the cost of clearing of goods at the ports and make it more competitive and more friendly.
Very well.
Now, has this been achieved?
To a large extent, it has been achieved in the sense that I would say that at the inception of the idea, the idea was to move things forward, to move the clearing charges, ports, facilities forward. But the problem has been in the real implementation of the idea behind the concession. Concession imbibes a lease agreement between the concessionaire and the federal government. It is not as if that necessarily it is a property of the concession. But the issue now is those reasons that the federal government at a point in time felt they were not they were not achieving, that led to the concessioning. Have they been implemented? My view is that no, for now, because if at the material time they had set out to do more, to do a little more, to regulate it, then it would have been there. Because if we say, do I put it, the vision might be there, and the mission is yet to be accomplished.
Achieved. Now, there's been talk about all manner of charges being imposed on shippers with sharp practices being perpetrated by shipping companies and terminal operators.
Very well.
Do you agree with this?
Very well, because of absence of regulation. There is no regulatory body. That has been the problem. That has been the position. It has been done because if you look at it the way it is, the attempt has been made by establishing the Nigerian Shippers Council, but it has not been equipped to do the job.
Now let's take a look at the port concessioning. Probably it was embarked on hurriedly by the state, by the government, because some major stakeholders have complained that they were not carried along in the exercise.
Very well, I agree, but I wouldn't say that because the stakeholders were not carried along at the inception of the idea that has been the problem. But the issue is that the problem with us is that immediately an idea comes into being, we stop and we rest. We don't work to actually monitor and regulate it and know the things that are needed to be updating the position. That's been the position.
Well, let's talk about one issue that I know is really like a topical one in maritime industry, the Cabotage Act. Now, the act was to domesticate some aspects of shipping business to Nigerians. What has there been? Would you say that the level of compliance has been satisfactory, or something better can be done? Because we're still talking about regulating the industry. Now, we know for a certainty that Nigeria has become an emerging market. It's no more a developing country. It's now an emerging market. And we're attracting investors from every part of the world. The ports are always, one of the stops where you bring your goods in, you have to offload and all of that. But we agree that we need to invite more foreign investments. But how about encouraging domestic business, which is what the Cabotage Act
should, all about.
Yes, should be promoting.
Very well.
So, would we say our compliance level is satisfactory, or something better should and can be done?
It is not yet satisfactory because we are not there. We are not yet there.
And why aren't we there yet?
The reason we aren't there yet is, Cabotage is all about encouraging the local stakeholders to get involved in shipping business. But having done that, you find out that behind the scene, that we are not, the Nigerian stakeholders are not yet equipped to be there competitively. At the end of the day, the regulated, like I said earlier, at the end of the day, if you look at the Cabotage Act, it is not enough. It is not enough to get it in place. Having gotten it in place, I think I'm of the view that a lot more need to be done to encourage the local stakeholders to participate in it. Because as it is now, the Cabotage Act is there, but still the shipping industry is dominated by foreigners.
So what can be done to ensure that indigenous players have a more active role in the industry?
Well, number one is, I would say, sensitization. The indigenous stakeholders are not yet sensitized, and there is a little more need to be done in terms of regulating the Cabotage Act itself. You follow? Because the act might be there. That is, the structure had been laid, the law had been made, had been put in place. But it is another thing to get it working and then get the local investors, the local stakeholders imbibed in it, and then to put it mildly, to discourage the foreigners into being major player in the implementation of Cabotage Act itself. Because if you look at the implementation stage as it is now, it is still being dominated behind the scene by foreigners.
By foreigners. Now, you've talked about the anomalies that's been witnessed in the process of concession in the ports. What approach would you consider appropriate in addressing these anomalies to ensure that the ports remain competitive and friendly to both domestic players and foreign players alike?
Very well. You know that in the maritime sector, that is where we are now, in order to, in the shipping line mainly, to make it competitive, the proper thing that should be done should be to establish a firmly rooted regulatory body. If you don't have economic regulatory body, you are not going to achieve the desired end. Like if you look at the Nigerian Shipping Act, for instance, its essence, the conception is to address this particular issue. But having done that, I put it that way, the federal government stopped short of putting the necessary infrastructure in place to make sure that these things work. For instance, you find out that as it is, notwithstanding the presence or the establishment of Nigerian Shipping Act, the indigenous Nigerian Ports Authority, ship owners, and still regulate the tariffs in the industry. You follow? There is no established regulatory body that says this is what should be done in compliance with the law establishing Nigerian Shipping Act, for instance. I'm not saying specifically that it has to be Nigerian Shipping Act, Nigerian Shippers Council, but any other body could be established independent of Nigerian Shippers Council or with it to make sure that tariffs are regulated, both local and import charges are regulated, so that at the end of the day you find out that there will be compliance and there will be a body that will be answerable to this and not be having divergent or indiscriminate charges between one shipper or one shipping company or the other.
Won't there be too many people doing everything? Because it seems to me that the Nigerian Shippers Council can still collect tariffs, whether import or export, or as the case may be, whether for domestic players or foreign players. Won't we have too many agencies duplicating duties?
No, I'm not saying that they should be divested of that function. They have been in place. Having already been in place, I wouldn't have. So
an agency should be created under the Nigerian Shippers Council.
Very well, because presently, for instance, there is a Nigerian Transport Commission, the bill that is before the National Assembly towards closing this vacuum or fulfilling this vacuum as it is. But until it is passed, it is not law. And at the moment, what the Shippers Council could do is a regulatory and advisory body that cannot say simpliciter that this is what we want to do. Because if you look at it in 1997, a regulatory body on local and import charges by National Shippers Council was established. And following it is a memorandum of understanding between users of port services and the providers of the services themselves. And you look at it, what the role that the Nigerian Shippers Council play is more or less consultative, and it has not really equipped them to say this and this are what should be done. When you talk about a regulatory body comes straight on the table and say these are what should be done. They lay down the rules. It's normal rules, law, and must to be complied with. But when you leave it the way it is now, the players do it their own way and they dominate. So that the reason behind the establishment of the Shippers Council, for instance, way back in 1978, still persists. The Nigerian Ports Authority, they regulate, they formulate their own tariffs. Railway, they formulate their own tariffs. Road Transport Associations, they formulate, or unions, they formulate their own tariffs. But what we are saying is that if there is an economic regulator, they will be in place and say, these are the benchmarks for this, and that. And once there is no compliance, they are now struck down. But as it is now, there is nothing like that. So that is why I think the NTC bill, if it should come to fruition, we should have to address these issues because the structure is already in place. The federal government has the option either to establish an entirely new Nigerian Transport Commission or to take it off from an existing structure, which in my view is Nigeria Shippers Council. Maybe effect a little amendment to the bill and then equip them with the powers to regulate the industry. So and in that way, sorry?
No, that's what I was just going to ask you. That probably more powers should be given to the Nigerian Shippers Council to make them effective as regulators.
That is the essence of the whole thing. Because when you talk of economic regulation, for instance, you talk about tariffs, maybe service delivery, and maybe entry and exit in the industry. When these things are not available, then we have no serious business, in my view. So that once the economic regulatory body is in place and they're equipped, the body, whether Nigerian Shippers Council, although my own view is having had the structure and having been there, a little amendment to the law or whatever should be made to equip them, and the older you are in a field, the better. So they will know, they will hit the ground and then take it off from there. And the shipping or maritime industry will be a better place for you, and the economy will also get a nudge.
Well, a couple of days ago, I spoke to the President of the National Council of Licensed Customs Agents, and one of the issues that came up was the fact that that sector of the economy, that's the maritime, seems to be suffering so much because there isn't enough capacity building. So is that also one of the issues that is currently militating against probably the ongoing reforms in ports industry?
Yes, I
so should we be focusing more on training and retraining?
That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if for instance, if the NTC bill we are talking about is properly screened and passed into law, I think with the benchmarks, with the purpose of establishing it, you cannot do away with. You can't do without capacity building, because that is the intellectual, the human being that will drive it. So we need them to be in place, because without capacity building, then even if you have a good framework, there is nobody to implement it.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for sharing your thoughts with us on Business Morning.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be with you.